I want to start with something small, something so ordinary it almost doesn't deserve to be the beginning of a story like this. It was a Tuesday night in June, and Marcus was loading the dishwasher while I sat at the kitchen table going through the week's schedule on my phone. We had Brody's baseball tournament on Saturday, my mother-in-law coming for dinner on Sunday, and I was trying to figure out if I could squeeze in a Costco run before the weekend. Marcus looked over his shoulder and said, "Hey, don't forget I've got the Henderson account kicking into high gear this month. Thursdays are probably going to be late nights for a while." I didn't think twice. I said, "Okay, I'll handle pickup on Thursdays." And that was it. That was how it started. He'd been married for 9 years. We had 2 kids, Brody, who was 8, and Lily, who had just turned 6. We lived in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waves from their driveways and the streets fill up with kids on bikes every evening from May through September. We had a good life. I want to be clear about that because I think sometimes people hear stories like mine and they assume the marriage was already broken before the betrayal. Ours wasn't, or at least I didn't think it was. Marcus worked in commercial real estate. Long hours were not unusual. He'd had stretches like this before, busy seasons where he was out late a couple nights a week and I held down the fort at home. I worked part-time as a dental office manager 3 days a week. I coached Lily's soccer team in the fall. I kept the house running. We were a team. We communicated. We had date nights once a month. We still laughed at the same dumb things, and we never went to bed angry at each other, or at least, we made a point of trying not to. So when the Thursday late nights began, I absorbed them the way I absorbed everything else. I fed the kids, I helped with homework, I got them bathed and in bed, and I left a plate in the oven for Marcus. He would come home somewhere between 9:30 and 10, tired but never strange about it. He'd eat standing at the counter, ask me how the kids were, tell me something about the deal, enough detail to make it real, and then we'd watch a little TV and go to sleep. I was not suspicious. I want to say that plainly because I've gone over it so many times since, trying to find the moment I should have known, and for a long time I couldn't find one. First Thursday passed, then the second, then the third. Summer rolled on, the baseball tournament, a weekend at my sister's lake house, a road trip down to Gatlinburg for our anniversary in July. Life was full, we were happy as far as I could tell. Brody lost his first tooth. Lily started reading chapter books. Marcus closed what he said was a piece of the Henderson deal and celebrated with a good bottle of red on a Friday night. I cooked steaks on the grill. It felt like a good summer. But I want to go back to something, a small thing. A thing I noticed in the middle of July and filed away without quite knowing what I was filing. Marcus came home on a Thursday in late July. It must have been around 9:45, and when I went to take his plate out of the oven, he said, "Oh, actually I grabbed something on the way home. I was starving, I didn't want to wait." Which was fine, that made sense. Except I realized, standing there holding his plate, that he had said almost the exact same thing the Thursday before. 2 Thursdays in a row, he had eaten before coming home. That was all, 2 dinners I had kept warm and he had not eaten. I set the plate back in the oven for the kids' lunch the next day and I didn't say anything about it. I told myself he was grabbing fast food because he was exhausted and hungry and didn't want to wait. I told myself it was nothing. And for 3 more weeks, I believed that. It was the middle of August when the second thing happened. I was cleaning out the car. Marcus drove a Chevy Tahoe and I had a habit of going through it every couple of weeks because the kids treated it like a trash can, and I found a receipt jammed under the passenger seat. It was from a restaurant called Meridian, which was a nicer place, the kind of place with tablecloths and a wine list, not the kind of place you went alone. The receipt was for 2 people. The date was a Thursday. I stood in the driveway with that receipt in my hand for probably 30 seconds. Then I took a photo of it on my phone and put it back where I found it. I don't know why I put it back. I think part of me already understood even then that I might need to know whether he knew I had found it, and if I took it, he would know. I didn't say anything that night, or the following Thursday. I watched him kiss me goodbye after dinner, watched him back the Tahoe out of the driveway, watched his taillights disappear around the corner at the end of our street, and I went back inside and helped Brody with a book report on Abraham Lincoln and told Lily it was time to put her tablet away. I didn't ask him where the receipt was from. I didn't bring up the missed dinners. I kept everything exactly as it was, and I waited, and I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that for 3 more months. September came and the kids went back to school and life shifted into that familiar fall rhythm that I have always loved. The mornings got cooler. I started making soup on Sundays. Lily's soccer season started up and I was back on the sidelines twice a week in my camp chair with a travel mug of coffee, cheering for a bunch of 6-year-olds who mostly ran in the wrong direction. It was normal. It was good. And every Thursday, Marcus kissed me goodbye after dinner and drove away, and I let him. I had almost convinced myself that the receipt meant nothing, almost. The thing about suspicion, real suspicion, the kind that lives in your chest rather than your head, is that it doesn't go away just because you tell it to. I had filed the receipt away in the back of my mind the same way you shove something into a junk drawer because you don't know what to do with it yet. It was still there. I knew it was still there. I just kept the drawer closed. But then October arrived and the drawer started opening on its own. It was a Sunday afternoon and Marcus was in the backyard raking leaves with Brody while I cleaned up from lunch. His phone was sitting on the kitchen counter face down, which I had noticed he had started doing more often, though I hadn't let myself think too hard about that either. It buzzed twice in a row. I didn't pick it up. I wasn't going to pick it up. But then Brody came running in through the back door asking for hot chocolate, and Marcus followed right behind him, and in the shuffle Marcus picked his phone up off the counter and glanced at the screen. His face didn't change, that was the thing. It stayed completely still in a way that felt careful, and then he put the phone in his back pocket and asked Brody what kind of marshmallows he wanted. I stood at the sink and I kept washing the pan I was washing, and I didn't say a single word. That night after the kids were in bed, I lay next to Marcus and I thought about that stillness on his face. I know my husband's expressions. I know what he looks like when a work text comes in on a Sunday. There is always a small tightening around his eyes, a little exhale, mild annoyance at the interruption. This had been different. This had been controlled. This had been a man making sure his face did not react. I thought about the receipt. I thought about the dinners he didn't eat. I thought about the phone face down on the counter. And then I thought about the way he had been with me lately. Not cold, he was never cold, but there was something slightly performative about his warmth recently, if that makes sense. Like he was being a good husband with just a little too much awareness of being a good husband, small things, the way he had started complimenting my cooking more than usual, the way he always knew where his phone was. I hated myself for thinking it. I lay there in the dark next to the man I had built my entire life with, and I hated my own brain for assembling these pieces. I told myself, you do not have proof. You have a restaurant receipt, 2 uneaten dinners, and a look on a man's face. That is not proof, that is anxiety. That is what 9 years of marriage and 2 kids and too much time in your own head looks like. So I went to sleep, and I kept going to sleep on that thought for 3 more Thursdays. It was the first week of November when the third thing happened, and this one I could not file away. I was picking Lily up from her after-school art program on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, just a regular Wednesday, and her teacher, Miss Patris, caught me at the door with that particular careful smile that teachers use when they need to say something delicate. She told me that Lily had made a beautiful painting that week, a family portrait. She handed me the rolled-up paper and I opened it in the hallway. Lily had painted 4 figures, me, her, Brody, and Marcus. She had labeled them all in her careful first-grade handwriting, and above the figure of Marcus, in purple crayon, she had written Daddy and his friend. I kept my face very still. I asked Lily casually on the drive home who Daddy's friend was. She said, the lady he waves to sometimes. When you drop me off at school on Thursdays, she's there and Daddy always waves and smiles. I asked what the lady looked like. Lily thought about it. Pretty, she said. She has red hair, she waves back. I drove the rest of the way home, and I did not say anything else about it. I got the kids started on homework, and I went to the kitchen, and I stood at the counter for a long time looking at nothing. A woman with red hair who Lily had seen enough times to put in a family portrait, who Marcus waved to, who waved back. I thought about school drop-off on Thursdays. I dropped the kids off on Thursdays because Marcus left early for work. That was what he told me, that on his late Thursdays he went in early to compensate. He had told me that in June when this all began, and I had believed him so completely I had never once thought to question the logic of it. I pulled out my phone and I looked at the photo I had taken of the restaurant receipt in August. Meridian, 2 people, a Thursday. I put my phone down and I started making dinner, and my hands moved on autopilot, and the whole time my mind was doing something it had refused to do for 5 months. It was adding things up. I want to tell you about the week between Lily's painting and the night I drove past his office, because that week was its own particular kind of quiet devastation, and I think it deserves to be said. I did not confront Marcus. Not yet. Part of that was practical. I needed to know more before I said a word because I understood instinctively that once I opened that door there would be no going back through it. But part of it was something harder to admit. Part of me was still hoping I was wrong. Still hoping that the pieces I had been assembling for 5 months would somehow, with just one more look, rearrange themselves into something innocent. I have a lot of compassion for the woman I was that week. She was trying so hard to hold 2 things at once, the life she believed she had and the growing certainty that it was not real. I started paying attention differently. Not frantically, I was careful, I was quiet about it. I checked our credit card statements online, something I had always left to Marcus because he handled the finances. In October alone, I found 3 charges to Meridian, all on Thursdays. The amounts were consistent: dinner for 2, a bottle of wine each time. I found a charge in September as well, and one in August that matched the receipt I had photographed in the driveway. 5 dinners at Meridian, 5 Thursdays. 5 times he had come home and told me about the Henderson account and eaten nothing from the plate I had kept warm in the oven. I closed the laptop and I sat at the kitchen table and I looked out the window at the backyard, at the swing set Marcus had built with his own hands the spring after Lily was born, at the garden beds I had put in along the fence line that were bare and brown now in November. I thought about everything this yard represented. Every Saturday morning we had spent out there. Every birthday party, every summer evening, every ordinary moment that had felt like enough. I thought, he has been lying to me since June. And then I thought, or longer. That second thought was the one that cracked something open in me, because I realized I had been so focused on the Thursdays that I had not once considered whether Thursday was the whole truth. Whether Thursday was just the part that had a schedule, a name, a convenient explanation built in from the beginning. I did not sleep well that week. I moved through my days carefully, normally, the way you walk on ice, each step deliberate and controlled. I made lunches and drove carpool and coached soccer practice and sat across from Marcus at dinner every night and passed the bread and asked about his day. He told me about work. He asked about mine. We talked about Thanksgiving coming up, whether we were going to his parents or mine. We watched TV after the kids went to bed. He put his arm around me on the couch. I let him. The Thursday of that week arrived the way all the others had. He got up early, kissed the kids goodbye at school drop-off, headed to the office. I went to work, I came home, I made dinner, and at 6:45, right on schedule, he kissed me in the kitchen, told me not to wait up, and backed the Tahoe out of the driveway. I stood at the kitchen window and I watched him go. And then I turned around and I looked at my two kids sitting at the table finishing their macaroni, and something in me went very quiet and very clear. I called my neighbor Dana and asked if she could sit with the kids for an hour. I told her I had forgotten something at the pharmacy. She came over in 10 minutes, the way good neighbors do, and I grabbed my keys and my coat and I drove. Marcus's office was 11 minutes from our house. I knew that because I had picked him up there dozens of times over the years, had sat in the parking lot with the kids eating drive-thru on evenings he ran late, and we wanted to surprise him. I knew the building. I knew which floor his office was on. I knew what his car looked like under the lights of that parking lot. I drove there and I turned onto the street that ran alongside the building and I slowed down. The parking lot was nearly empty. A few scattered cars near the entrance, but none of them were his Tahoe. The building itself was mostly dark, a few lights on upper floor. But nothing that indicated a team working late on a Thursday night deal. His office was on the 4th floor, south side of the building. Those windows were completely dark. I sat in my car across the street for probably 4 minutes. Long enough to be certain, long enough for every rationalization I had ever constructed to dissolve completely. He was not there. He had never been there on Thursdays. 8 months of Thursday evenings, and his office was dark and his car was gone, and somewhere in the city, he was sitting across a table from a woman with red hair at a restaurant with tablecloths and a wine list. I drove home. I thanked Dana and told her the pharmacy had the wrong prescription ready, just a mix-up, and she laughed and went back across the street, and I locked the front door and leaned against it in the dark hallway for a moment. Then I went upstairs and I checked on both kids. Brody was asleep with his book still open on his chest. Lily had her nightlight on and her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. I stood in each doorway for a little longer than I needed to. When Marcus came home at 9:53, I was on the couch with the TV on and a cup of tea going cold on the coffee table. He came in smelling faintly of something I could not quite name, not cologne exactly, something softer, something that was not mine. He said the Henderson account was finally moving. He said he thought they'd be close to done by Christmas. He asked if I wanted him to make popcorn. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I said, sure, that sounds good. And I sat there on that couch while my husband made popcorn in our kitchen, and I knew everything. And he had no idea that I knew. In that moment, that specific, terrible, ordinary moment was the loneliest I have ever felt in my entire life. I gave myself 2 weeks. I want to explain why, because I think some people would have walked into that kitchen and said something right then, and I understand that impulse completely. But I had 2 children asleep upstairs, and I had 9 years of a shared life, and I had learned something important about myself in those 5 months of quiet watching. I did not make good decisions when I was operating purely from pain. I needed to know what I was walking into before I walked into it. So I found a family law attorney. Her name was Patricia, and she worked out of a small office suite above a dry cleaner on the east side of Columbus, and she was exactly the kind of woman I needed in that room, calm, precise, and completely unsentimental about what I was describing. I told her everything. The receipts, the credit card statements, the dark office windows. She told me what I needed to document, what I needed to preserve, and what my options looked like. I left that office 2 hours later feeling something I had not expected to feel. Ready? Not happy, not healed, not anywhere close to either of those things, but ready. I told Marcus on a Saturday morning in late November, 2 days before Thanksgiving. The kids were at my mother's for the weekend. I had arranged that quietly the week before, told her I needed a little time, and my mother, who has always understood more than she lets on, asked no questions and took them Friday afternoon. Marcus and I were alone in the house for the first time in what felt like years. He was making coffee when I came downstairs, standing at the Keurig in his weekend clothes, scrolling his phone with one hand, completely unaware. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had looked at that credit card statement, where I had eaten 100 ordinary dinners, where Lily had done her homework the night she painted that family portrait, and I said his name. Something in my voice made him turn around. I told him I knew about the Thursdays. I told him I had driven past his office. I told him about Meridian, about the 5 charges, about the receipt I had found in August and photographed and put back without saying a word. I told him that our daughter had painted her in a family portrait and called her daddy's friend. I watched his face move through about 7 different expressions in the span of 30 seconds. The stillness he had used on me for months collapsed completely. What replaced it was something I had never seen on my husband's face before, a kind of desperate, scrambling exposure, like a person caught in a light they had no idea was coming. He said her name before I asked him for it. I think that told me more than anything else he could have said. Her name was Renee. They had met through a professional conference in the spring, March, he said, which meant this had been going on for 8 months when I confronted him, and for 2 months before the Thursdays even began, which meant the Thursdays were not the beginning. The Thursdays were just when it became scheduled, when it became something with a system. I sat with that for a moment, the idea that there had been. Period, March, April, May, when he was lying to me without even the structure of a Thursday. Just lying whenever he needed to. Just building something behind my back while I coached soccer and made dinner and drove carpool and believed completely in the life we were living. He cried, he told me he was sorry. He told me he had not meant for it to become what it became. He told me he loved me and he loved the kids and he did not want to lose his family. I listened to all of it. I did not cry, not in front of him, not that morning. I just listened, and when he was done I told him that I had already spoken to an attorney and that I thought he should find somewhere else to stay for a while and that we would need to figure out how to tell the children together in a way that protected them as much as possible. He looked at me like he had expected something different. A fight maybe, tears, anger, something loud and breaking. I think he had prepared himself for a storm and instead he got a woman who had already weathered it alone and come out the other side. That is not to say I did not fall apart. I did. I fell apart in my car in the parking lot of a Target 2 days after he moved out, sitting there for 20 minutes because I had walked in for paper towels and walked back out when I saw the Keurig display and thought about Saturday mornings and could not hold myself together anymore. I fell apart on the phone with my sister on a Tuesday night in December while the kids were asleep. I fell apart quietly, in the small pockets of time when no one needed me to be okay, and I let myself fall apart completely because I had learned in those months of keeping everything together that pretending was its own kind of damage. Thanksgiving that year was at my mother's house. I sat at her table with my kids and my sister and her family and I ate turkey and sweet potato casserole and I helped Lily cut her meat and I listened to Brody tell everyone about his baseball season and I laughed at my brother-in-law's terrible jokes. And somewhere in the middle of it, my mother caught my eye across the table and gave me a look that said, "I see you, you're doing it, I'm proud of you." And I had to look away because that was almost the thing that broke me. It is April now. Marcus and I are in the middle of what our attorney calls an uncontested process, which is a quiet way of saying that he knows what he did and he is not fighting me on anything. The kids are in counseling. Brody goes quiet sometimes in ways that worry me and then comes back. Lily asked me last week if Daddy still loves us and I told her that he absolutely does and that some things between grown-ups are complicated but that has nothing to do with how much her father loves her. She seemed satisfied with that. I am not sure I was. I still sleep on my side of the bed. I don't know when that will change. Some mornings I wake up and for just a second, less than a second really, the world is still the way it was before, and then I remember, and I let myself feel it, and then I get up and I make coffee and I get my kids ready for school. That is enough, for right now that is enough.